happy to have our Tom Pham, our speaker today. Tom is an SDIS member for about 7 years, he said, right? He's a professional programmer by training who's worked for a lot of big companies, including IBM Corporation. For about 7 years in the early 2000s, Tom participated regularly in a reading group called the San Diego Great Books, which strengthened his interest in philosophy and independent study. And so the present talk came out of an online discussion group in which he still, I assume you still actively participate in, right? And one of its ongoing reading projects and topics of discussion is Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics. I think I said that right. So the title of his talk is What Wisdom Must Be Like for One Who is Actually Wise, an Aristotelian Perspective. So Tom.
Thank you very much, Jamie, and welcome everybody to this presentation. The title of this presentation is going to be is What Wisdom Must Be Like for One Who is Wise. And all of this can be gleaned from the Nicomachean Ethics. I have a few things that I add just for myself, but I think it helps to understand what Aristotle is talking about. So here is the plan for today. We're going to have a big picture situating where wisdom is. And for wisdom, the translation that I'm using, it translates the Greek word phronesis. And so what I'm showing is first, the structure of the human soul for Aristotle, and then a classification of knowing. Then there's also, in order to understand what wisdom is, we have to contrast it with the other virtues. And so we have the moral virtues and the intellectual virtues to contrast that with wisdom. Then wisdom has to be understood as cognitive, what that is, what the wise people actually is aware of, and how do they gain that. And then the object of awareness, the object of being wise, it can be seen in terms of the cognitive object as well as the teleological object. And that's pretty much what I would say what the wise people are seeing, what it must be like for them. And then we have the Q&A. Here's the first part. It's a whirlwind kind of a big picture, but we have to understand that Aristotle's view from almost 2,400 years ago, it's very different from ours. And he takes the notion of soul, not in terms of the Christian view of soul, where it can leave the body and so on. For Aristotle, the soul is almost like a kind of energy, a kind of capacity in the human living animal. So we have to look at that from that context. Aristotle's approach assumes that everyone already knows what wisdom is, perhaps as a word, and also perhaps as an intellectual virtue. But his approach is to take the notion that you have to be moral to be a good person in order to be wise, and vice versa. So there's a kind of a reciprocal relationship between being wise and being moral. And when he presents his view of wisdom, uh, the audience for him is young people. So one of the part of the proposal I made to Jamie when I pitched this presentation to him is that you think of it as a presentation of wisdom for young people, as in, and the word young and old is kind of relative, of course. For Aristotle, he was in his mid 40s when he presented the his view of the ethics, and for him that's old because the young people that he was lecturing to were in their late teens or early 20s, citizens of Athens who are going to become soldiers and workers and landowners as well. So that's the cohort that he's speaking to. But if we translate this into the 21st century, we can think of the young people for Aristotle would be people who are fresh out of high school, people who are, who let's say, who just got released from prison after a long incarceration, or people who are immigrants to the new country with maybe a few $100 in their pockets. So that's the kind of audience that Aristotle is speaking to about what this wisdom is and why people want to have that. But part of that require him to bring in this big picture, and that would mean that they have to understand that the soul, the human soul, everyone has one, but it's very undisciplined when you start out from the beginning. Um, and if you have a baby, you know that, well, that's what a baby is, that the human baby, the human soul is very undisciplined. So there has to be some process for that soul to become disciplined, to be organized, to be well well suited for living in society. And there's a kind of a four rung or four-step process that's presented uh, in the text. And so there's the part of the soul that is he calls it the passion. In various translations, it's the passion, sensitive, the sensible part of the soul. That's one part. And then the goal is to have virtue of character, which is the kind of praiseworthy type of character in a person. But what's the step between having this sensitive and sensible part of the soul to reach this kind of virtue? And so there's a kind of a four-rung process where each human being has desires. We have three kinds of desires, or three kinds of affective reactions. There's the appetite, the animal desires, the urging for food, sex, and all that. And then there are the emotions, the feeling, the spirit, and then the human level. At the human level, we have wants and wishes. And children can get temper tantrums so easily because their desires are very powerful. But we need a way, or people need a way to train and help the child to control himself a little bit. And so we have habits. So that's the next rung in all of this view, the common view. So far what I'm presenting is the common view that Aristotle accepts as well. And then after habit, we seek a certain type of disposition or tendencies or things that can happen based on the condition at hand. And then finally, we have what is called the active condition, or something that is now built into the soul, um, that 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 can control, and so that the locus of control is no longer outside or based on condition or based on the environmental triggers, but rather it comes from the inside. And these are the active conditions that are called virtues. And so that's the basic structure of the way to get from an undisciplined soul into the more organized, kind of praiseworthy type of soul that a human being can achieve. And so, just basically, what I have here is a description of what a soul is. It's the more technical term is it's the first activation of a body that is potentially alive. So that's just very technical. But what that says is that for a complete human soul, we have something like a first level potential. That's what are you potentially as a human being? For example, a human being potentially can walk, can talk, and so on. And then the second level of potentiality is something that you build for yourself, such as the ability to type, the ability to play piano, the ability to um, think logically. Those are the potential for that you build. But then the last item, the present activity, that's actually turning on whatever potential that you have. So the distinction between present activity and any of the dunamis is that with dunamis, you can go to sleep and you can still have it. But you have to be awake and you have to perform the activity to be able to say that you are in fact having or doing that activity. So the example that many people know is that you can have the potential that you can grow in potentiality to become brave. But if you get shot and die, well, then you only had the potential to be brave. You were never brave in the actual activity sense, because you never had any confrontation where that particular character trait had to be turned on and to guide the action to be actively brave. So that's the distinction that Aristotle makes between dunamis and energeia, between the activity itself versus the potentiality. And so here are the structure of the human soul for Aristotle. There's the plant level, the Phutikon, that has all the nutritive, generative, reproductive kind of activities that we can have as a human being, but he puts that as at the plant level. So to a large extent, people who are in a comatose kind of situation, when they're in a coma, they are living at the plant level. And then there's the animal level of the soul. That's where we have cognition. That's where we have perception, and we have feelings and so on. And as well, the ability to move. Animal is distinguished from plants in that that animals can locomote. And then at the human proper level, there's the part that has wants, not just plain old appetite and the sensitive, but wishes and wants exist at that level, at the human level. And we can think as well. And that's Aristotle calls that the godlike level. Not that he believes in God, but he acknowledges that the conventional view of his time thinks that in thinking about things that cannot be otherwise, we are like gods. And so now about the part that can take guidance from reason, as I said before, we we have desire, we have appetite, we have feeling, we have want, whim, and upgraded desires. And choice, human choice, has to do with the idea that Aristotle's view in the big picture is that we have free will, and that when we do something, we had a hand in making that action to happen. And so goals for Aristotle is always internally generated. Now we have influences everywhere, but at the end of the moment, that we are making that goal either for ourselves or for the things in the future. And so that was the slide on the affective components of the soul. Now is the let's say the cognitive part of the soul. And Aristotle's way of splitting that is into the area of the things that about that cannot be otherwise, and the things that can be otherwise. So so we have two sources of discursive thinking, two capacities. For discursive, meaning you put two and two together, you can have a certain kind of inferences. That's what discursive thinking, but then there's also a kind of a non-discursive thinking. And that's what you're seeing in this three parts. So first, let me describe the first area. We have the speculative thinking, and then we have the practical thinking. Speculative thinking has to do with knowledge or thinking about things that human beings cannot change, such as gravity or the orbital motion of planets and stars and things of that sort. And then for the practical thinking, that's for those facts that we want to discover that can admit of being otherwise, so that whether there are 57 states in the United States or just 50, that's a human choice, and that's in the realm of practical thinking. And there's also another component of things that can admit of being otherwise, and that's productive thinking, applied science, applied kind of thinking about whether to build tables and chairs and appliances in a certain way. That's the area of productive thinking that's available. So there's discursive thinking, and then there's the non-discursive kind of thinking, which and those are the two parts of the soul that Aristotle talks about. So again, I'm presenting a very, very broad view of what the soul is for at the time of Aristotle's lecture, but he adds his own twist, and this is the twist that I'm bringing in. So as we just said, the soul has the non-rational, and then there's the part with reason. And for Aristotle, in the Nicomachean Ethics, book 1, chapter 13, he splits it up into these parts. The vegetative part, which I just talked about, the people who are living in a comatose state. But then there's the appetitive and the sensitive, as well as the sensible. That's the perceptive perception that people and animals can have. And then there's the rational, the properly rational part of the soul. And then within this part, as I said, people starting as babies can have very strong appetite, strong emotions, and they're out of control unless they have habits, or we make them have habits, or we do a kind of I don't know what's the modern term now, a positive reinforcement, a negative kind of reinforcement to get them into that kind of this habit, stimulus response kind of thing. So that's what habit is. And then, but so that's in red. In blue, the things that are done by the human being himself or herself. So we can grow virtues of character on our own, and and that's what the virtues are. It's to control the appetite, the sensitive, and so on. And then the rational part, we have the virtues of thought. Again, it's in blue to signify that it's the individual who has to decide, hey, I want to have to be able to think well, and because it's not something that can be done by habit. So that's at the beginning of this larger picture of Aristotle's view. And so, of course, as we read the Nicomachean Ethics, we see that there are traits for acting and traits for feeling. But again, it's still that's just an elaboration, because such traits of acting and traits for feelings can be toward the good or toward the bad. If it's good, then it's virtue. If it's bad, it's not. So, but this is the more generic view of these character traits that people can have. And then Aristotle, in book 6, chapter 1 and 2, he elaborates on the rational part of the soul, because what we're interested in is where is wisdom? Because wisdom for Aristotle is not a trait for acting or a trait for feeling, but where is it? So he said, well, we already said that the rational part can be split into the calculative and the scientific part, and this is the more godlike part that I mentioned earlier. And this is the part for doing things that on an everyday kind of basis for human action. And so he splits that further on to talk about beliefs and the deliberative aspect of this. But we can just fold that back into the calculative part. But gradually, as Aristotle elaborates on it, he develops this calculative part to include the information concerning ourselves, such as our appetites and our emotions and our wishes. And so this is what I mean by the blue part, is that we get to control what it is that we want to in life, and the wishes that we have, whether they are unrealistic wishes or more achievable kind of wishes. That's up to us to decide, with the help of the rational part, of course. And that's what the deliberative part comes into the picture. And so this is where Aristotle says how we form our beliefs about the world, but also significantly about ourselves, determines how whether we make a good life for ourselves. And so in this larger picture then of the human soul, with the interaction between the appetites, the feelings, and the wishes and desires, along with the rational part of the soul, we form these more blue stuff, which means the things that we can develop ourselves potentially to turn on, so that we can act well. And so this is where we have technology, the abilities to make things. And then there's phronesis, that's wisdom. from this part of the soul. And then there's nous, which is intellect. That's the non-discursive kind of thinking. And then with the other side, we have two. We have episteme, which is knowledge. Scientific knowledge is the usual translation for that. And Sophia. And so Sophia is on the side of the scientific, and phronesis is on the side of this belief formative part. And this is another area that I'm going to talk about later to distinguish what wisdom is, because a lot of people, especially with the teaching of Plato ahead of Aristotle, they kind of mix them up. So Aristotle wants to distinguish the two. So that's pretty much what I think is the structure of the soul. But now let's talk about the classification of knowledge that Aristotle depends on. And again, we have to compare what he has with what Aristotle has. I mean, what Plato has. And so here's Plato's view first. A very big picture. What we have is the 4 words transliterated as eidesis, doxa, episteme, and gnosis. Now, and that all of this is considered some form of knowledge one way or the other, but for Plato, gnosis is real knowledge of real reality, whereas doxa is only something that human beings can have. And then when we have justified true doxa, then we have episteme. So that's the structure of Plato's notion of knowledge. And Aristotle rejects this classification. Instead, he has this. So again, this is just a table to let you in on the idea that the word knowledge, as translated into English nowadays, is equivocal on Aristotle's view. He actually has 3 words that gets translated as knowledge. That's, as we said, gnosis, eidesis, and episteme. But for the sake of understanding Aristotle more fully and more clearly, I prefix the word know with G, O, and E to remind myself and to remind readers that Aristotle talks about different levels of knowledge. So there's G knowledge, O knowledge, and E knowledge. That's the statement process. What is the object of knowing? It's the G knowable, or the O knowable, or the E knowable. So that's part of reading Aristotle requires that we understand that he has these 3 levels of knowledge. And the structure is as follows. So again, to use the soul of the animal first, and then the human soul, and so on. Animals can have perception. That's aesthesis. The lowest of the low animal, if we can think of an earthworm as an animal, then it has some form of perception, according to Aristotle. A clam in the ocean has some form of perception. But then the next level of evolution, let's say, Aristotle didn't have evolution, but let's pretend, then the next level of complexity for an animal is to have a potential for retaining perception, memory. And so memory is the next capacity of knowing. And then beyond that, experience is the next capacity for not only remembering, but also seeing patterns, seeing relationship among the perceptibles. And then but all of this is under the large umbrella of the larger concept of gnosis. So gnosis includes all of this. It's what you're seeing is a classification, but then there's a divide. There's the human divide. We have all of these three, but in addition, we have language. And so with language, we have nous, or intellect. That's a capacity to be aware at this level where it requires some kind of language. And then there's eidesis. That's the other word that I mentioned previously. And then within eidesis, we have awareness or knowledge of the eternal invariant things versus the awareness of things that can be changed. And you saw that earlier. So on this side, we would have things like gravity and the orbital motion of planets. And on this side is how many states there are in the United States, and whether a dollar right now is $2,000. I mean, a dollar is worth 120 or so yen or something like that. So those are facts or awarenesses that can be gained under eidesis. And then within each one of these, we have episteme. And on this slide, we have technology. And so the structure for Aristotle then is that he has e-knowledge is the most complex form of knowledge. And then, but generic to e-knowledge and techne or know-how is o-knowledge. And then o-knowledge is one species of g-knowledge, which is among them are perception, memory, experience, intellect, and so on. So this is the picture that Aristotle is telling us. So that means that Sophia here has to do with knowledge about eternal invariant things, and whereas phronesis, or wisdom, has to do with knowledge about temporal changeable things, which are separate. This knowledge is separate from know-how, in the same way that Sophia is separate from e-knowledge over here. That's pretty much the large picture, and you can see fill in the extra that's available. But the real big picture is right here. That you have to make that distinction between where Sophia is located and where phronesis is located. So far, do you still know what wisdom is? It's still a big picture, right? But what you're seeing is that Aristotle presupposes that you have this view in front of, or as a youth, as someone who is 17, 18, 19 years old, coming into his lyceum, to be able to see his picture. Now he has a little bit more to talk about why he disagreed with Plato, but throughout, this is the picture of what knowledge is about for Aristotle. So next, I want to then show you the contrast between virtues and the rest. So far, you only got the structure of the human soul and a classification of knowing. So now, what are the moral virtues to be contrasted against wisdom? And what about the intellectual virtues to be contrasted with wisdom? We already know that from the previous slide that phronesis is going to have to be different from techne. It has to be different from Sophia. It has to be different from episteme, and it has to be different from nous, because all of this is under the human level of awareness. where a language is involved. So now let's get into the moral virtue. But in order to do that, I need to present another structure of the virtue. So here's the soul, and I entitle this to be soul craft, because for Aristotle, because of our ability to see ourselves and introspect and to improve ourselves, we are building ourselves. Uh, uh, and to a large extent, people who don't build themselves, um, well, that's a vice for Aristotle. So in this sense, self-learning or continuing lifelong learning is very much what Aristotle is presenting. So soulcraft is this view that we are building ourselves. And so here's the structure of the characteristics of the soul. So if you're saying, what is the soul? And earlier we said soul is the first activation of a body that is potentially alive. And that's just a very general definition of what the soul is. What the soul is if you can just look at a human being, look at your neighbor, look at your friend and your family member, and say, hey, over time, I noticed that, okay, the person grows in physical appearance, but character-wise, what's happening? Have we noticed something regular and improved in the person? And so what we are seeing then is that there are a certain kind of disposition, a kind of recurring activity or recurring trait that the person exhibits. And so that's what diathesis is. And the next level, and you saw the four rungs that we talked about before, that some of them become more fixed or more persistent and become more steadfast, as opposed to the transient version of these disposition. And then the person makes a point, the human person makes a point that, yeah, I'm going to be this kind of a person. For example, I'm going to be punctual. That is a conscious intention on the individual to say, okay, yeah, I've noticed that for the last several months, I've been very regular at showing up at the gym or whatever. But then now, hey, let's make this part of me, and let's choose to be punctual. So that's the level where this emenetikos happens. And then among all of these, it splits into one group for acting, and the other one for emotion, for emoting, because there are character traits in us that allows us to feel a certain way or not a certain way, one way or the other. And so Aristotle splits them up. And then within the action potential, then these character traits are, if they are praiseworthy, then they are called virtue. But then there are gazillions of these character traits, some of them falling short, some of them going too far. And this is what many people read Aristotle superficially say, oh, virtue is the mean or medium between the extreme. Well, that is exactly what this is. There's falling short and there's going too far in certain activity. For example, let's use punctuality again. Is punctuality something that, something that can be overdone, as in you show up 30 minutes ahead? Well, is that good or bad for your whole life if you are wasting time 30 minutes ahead to get to some place? So that's where the the falling short, going too far for that particular trait can occur. And so Aristotle's list of virtues include these things. And this is just a sample. I'll show you the rest. But being brave, being moderate, being fair, being funny, being ambitious, those are the character traits that Aristotle would call virtues. And then there are those that are going too far and falling short. He would call them vices. And not only these are available, but as I said, we have the ones for falling short, going too far, and the middle state for emotions as well. And in the text, Aristotle talks about shame as a middle state, and people who have the ability to feel shame, to feel ashamed at certain things that they shouldn't do, but it happened, then they feel ashamed. Those are good good emotional traits to acquire, as opposed to those people who are shameless, people who have no sense of dignity, and so on. Then their emotional traits are falling short or going too far in that sense. So now we again, this is a very broad view of where all the virtues that Aristotle wanted to talk about. And you can see that brave, the middle states right here, is opposed to cowardly and reckless. And then being moderate is the opposites, or the extremes are the feeling nothing and the feeling lecherous, and being gluttonous, and then being gentlemanly versus being extravagant and ungentlemanly, but also generous. Being generous is being ungenerous, and being extravagant opposed to extravagant. There are certain words that go on both sides, and you can see why when you see the dimension of measurement over there. But Aristotle talks about being lavish is the middle state that is praiseworthy, as opposed to being cheap and being tacky and vulgar. Being proud, that's another word for that is pride. So Aristotle definitely is not a Christian, because pride for Aristotle is a virtue and not a vice. As opposed to what? Being humble, humility, and as opposed to what else? Full of himself, vain. Then there's ambitious. Now there's being unambitious and being too ambitious. Those are the extremes. And then being good natured, like a friend, being candid about yourself, versus being phony and being self-deprecating. And then you have to be funny and being tactful in and urbane in a society. So Aristotle fully acknowledges that you have to have a sense of humor in a certain sense, in a very tactful way, that is. And again, as I mentioned, do you know how to be ashamed, or are you shameless, or you're too shy or too embarrassed, and so on. And of course, justice, the term that I use is, instead of using justice, I use the word fair, but it conveys the same Greek term there. And you can be unfair or unjust in the lesser sense, or you can be unfair or unjust in the extreme over sense. But fair is just the right amount. That's why I like the fair term better than the word justice. So these are the dimensions of measurement that has to do with how to put one or the other over. And so and again, these are the structure of the character trait that people have in gaining each one of these virtues that so again, this is just too much, and so I'm just going to skip over it. But basically, the larger picture of Aristotle's ethics in one sentence is as follows. And it's a long sentence, so bear with me. But I think it's worth it because then it shows exactly why wisdom comes into the picture. So it's a sentence that has to have a period at the end. So right now there's no period at the end. So you have to keep on reading until you see the period at the end. So for a human being to live a human life qua flourishing, enjoying every good with nothing amiss, every good known and attainable, because based on civilization, his part of the civilization, he didn't have certain things like the internet or so on. So he didn't know that. But let's say that for every good with nothing amiss, known and attainable of the body, of the soul. So there are goods of the body, goods of the soul, and good of the cosmos, meaning external goods. And so the external goods would include money. It would include respect and honor. It would include, sorry, I made this during Christmas. Social relationship. So these are the cosmos or external goods. Example of a good of the body would include good looks, for example, good body, healthy body, muscular body, and good health. And good of the soul would be that example I mentioned. Punctuality is a good of the soul. Knowledge, that's another good of the soul. Wisdom is another good, but that's for later. But the whole point is that a human to live and to flourish, you have to have all of these goods with nothing missing. And so and among civil social relationship, you have all kinds of relationships. So let me just skip through all of the kind of social relationship Aristotle was talking about. So let's just say these are the relationships that we have, including state and private relationship and so on, with nothing amiss. So there you go. So far, I've only described what we need, right? So these are the things on the left side here, what we need. And now this is what we need to do in order to fulfill our needs, according to Aristotle. So continuing with my sentence, we haven't finished the sentence, but the whole point is that for a human being to live a human life while flourishing, enjoying all of these goods with nothing missing, then we need to act optimally. And now you can see a one-for-one kind of relationship that Aristotle is talking about. So if you want to have these goods, you have to protect your core values. You have to refill your natural needs. You have to make money and to have to spend money. That's in, and so each one of these in blue designate a passage in the Nicomachean Ethics talking about that particular virtue that we talked about, like being generous and being gentlemanly would be book 4, chapter 1. And then fulfilling natural needs, that's being moderate. Protecting core value, book 3, chapter 6 through 9, that's bravery. So each one of these is a connection to the prior needs that we have. And so concerning civil society, living in a society, you have to be good-natured. You have to be something like a friend. You have to be straight with yourself. You don't want to self-deprecate or to be boastful and all that. And then you have to be funny and charming and so on. And chapter 9 is not doing shameful ends. And then beyond that, not using ugly means or hurting other people. And then book 4, chapter 5 is choosing and prioritizing objects of desires. And so pretty much book 5 is here. 6, 7, and 8 have to do with thinking independently, accepting who you are, and then staying self-serious. And then disrespecting evil, and then so the rest. So then social relation in terms, that's book 5. Book 5 is about justice, or as I said, being fair. Um, and then, but so you can see that so far, if I am repeating the sentence fragment because there's no period yet in the whole thing, you say, for a human being to live a human life qua flourishing, enjoying every good known and attainable with nothing missing, one has to act optimally at protecting core values, refilling natural needs, growing one's worth, respecting inwardly, growing one's ability, respecting outwardly, making money, spending money, disrespecting evil, valuing only the truly good, trading value for equal value on needs, valorizing human achievement, thinking independently, accepting self, staying self-serious, choosing, prioritizing objects of desire. What's this? Electing public, well, okay. So crafting laws, enforcing laws, arbitrating disputes. So that's in the next book, though. So that's why I'm just saying, if you want to see the rest of this Republican state of affairs, just go to that next book, which is not Ethica, but Politica. And so as determined by orthos logos. So that's the, and what is that? As deemed by one with phronesis. What does that mean? As deemed by one's being wise, period. So basically, Aristotle's whole theory of ethics, with this one single sentence that I have here, depends on your being wise, my being wise, anybody's being wise. If we are to have all of this requirements on the left side and being able to do the right thing on any one of these things on the right side, it depends on this one little thing over there, and that's the whole point of the ethics. And unfortunately, when you read the Nicomachean Ethics from multiple translations, you will find that phronesis is translated all over the place. So here's phronesis. It's and the order is from left to right. Here is from the oldest to the latest. Oldest is from 1908. The latest is 2020. And you can see that for phronesis, it starts with practical wisdom, prudence, wisdom, practical judgment, prudence, practical wisdom, wisdom. So it's not very consistent. So if you're reading from one text to another, you say, oh, what's going on? But add to that complication, look down at Sophia. Right below that, you see it's philosophic wisdom, intellectual accomplishment, wisdom, theoretical wisdom, higher philosophical knowledge. So the term wisdom has been conflated all over the place, past and present. And that's why I'm trying to just use the word phronesis when I can. But if I do anything, I'm following the Adam Beresford's translation by calling it wisdom. So what that means is that there's a lot of confusion about what phronesis is because it's so related to Sophia. And so that's what I want to bring up next about what Sophia is, so that we can have a real contrast between what Sophia is and what phronesis is. So Sophia then, sorry, let me see. Okay, the term Sophia already has a meaning in Aristotle's day prior to his lecturing about it. Aristotle makes use of this everyday meaning from common usage in order to extract what he thinks Sophia really is. And so here are the two examples that he had, or that he gave during his lecture. Commonly, we ascribe Sophia or Sophos to any master level craftsman or artist who is most precise exacting, and refined and perfect in practicing the relevant craft or the technique. And the two examples that he gave is Phidias of Athens. He was known for overseeing the construction of the Parthenon, for making the statue of Athena and other sculptural decorations there, and for making the seated Zeus for the temple of Zeus at Olympia. And the other Sophos that he had was Polycletus of Argos. And this guy was known for making the chryselephantine statue of Hera for the Heraium of Argos, and as well as for advocating a system of proportion in which every part of the body was related mathematically to every other, and was admired and cited by Socrates as exemplifying Sophia. So what do we get from this kind of description? Sophia in this common usage context pertains to a mastery or expertise in a specific art with utmost precision and technical virtuosity, both in the works made and in the aesthetic standards. But Aristotle rejects this common usage view of Sophia, grounding it instead in a different context while preserving its key quality. And the key context here is that it's not in any particular art that Aristotle is looking at, but instead he wants us to say that Sophia is something that is without qualification. You don't have to say he is Sophos in violin, a virtuoso, or in violin playing. No, that's just too limiting. A Sophos, someone who is wise in this Sophia kind, must be without qualification. So his example here is not for his being Sophos at ditch digging, plowing, sculpting, guitar playing, or anything else. Sophia thus implies the having of the most precise, refined, perfect, exacting of a whole realm of e-knowledge, science. So in other words, if we are reading this correctly, Aristotle would put Albert Einstein to be a sophos, someone who has this, because he has complete mastery of a whole realm of science, or someone like of that caliber to be called a sophos. And of course, this science is, as relative to the whole of the science, is contextually fundamental. So it cannot just be any old body of science. It has to be a science that is fundamental to the rest of the other sciences. So that's why I think physics is one, maybe chemistry is another, biology is another, but not microbiology, not genetics, because that's just too narrow. He wants a broad one. So that's what's going on here. Okay, let's see. Let's go to the next one. Let's see. Okay, let's just skip the rest because I'm looking at the time and I want to get to what the main part. But you get the point here. I think that that while the topic of this is about Sophia, Aristotle's theme remains to be about how to contrast Sophia with phronesis. And so that's what he's trying to tell you, that we're not talking about Sophia when we're talking about the kind of wisdom for the sake of living a good life and for the sake of making good decisions so that you can do all the things virtuously. So let me read this part because it's important here. With things eternal and unchanging, the content of Sophia, for example, whiteness and straightness, is the same for everyone, everywhere, and every when. But with things conditional and changing, the content of phronesis, for example, health and goodness, is different for every kind of living thing, meaning one set of things for mankind and another set for fish kind, and so on. And any living being that could observe well the things concerning its own interest would qualify as wise. So he acknowledges that wise in the sense that he's talking about is very specific to the human being, not to Martians or to some other alien race out there in space, because then they have their own version of what is good health, what is good for them, what is good for their kind. So that's the point that he's making, that phronesis is a kind of wisdom concerning human beings. And so that's why sometimes people talk about an owl or a certain elephant as being wise, because it seems that it knows what it needs to do for itself or for its kind. Thus, the common denominator to wisdom, phronesis, even when its content is different from different kinds, is that one displays clearly a capacity for forethought about one's own life so as to anticipate one's needs and make provisions for one's flourishing. So let me see if I can skip this part. Yeah. So you already know that Sophia is characterized by people like Thales and Anaxagoras because they were the ones who thought to be sophoi. But Aristotle doesn't think that many of them, not Thales, but other people, are not wise in the phronimoi, in a phronesis sense. People say these great men are clueless about what is to their own best interest. And the example people kept on using is that Thales would fall. He would look up at the stars to see what's going on, but then he would fall in a well or something like that. So yes, they also say the things the sophoi know and lasso grasp are extraordinary, amazing, wondrous, difficult, and worthy of reference, but useless for the sake of living a good life. Why? Because they don't seek to know the things that are good for human beings. By contrast, the wise knows what's good for human beings. So with wisdom, phronesis is concerned with human things, things about which it is possible to deliberate. What belongs most of all to the work of a wise person? It is to deliberate well, to be good at decision making. And the 3 guidelines for deliberating well is that no one deliberates about things that are incapable of being otherwise. No one deliberates about things that don't involve a goal, and that goal is something good that is doable in action. You have to be able to do it. If you're not able to do it, then what's the point of thinking about it? The unconditionally good decider is someone whose calculation enables him to be good at hitting upon the best of human goods that is achievable or doable in action. I think that's pretty good. And now we can see that the structure of Aristotle, that Sophia as a kind of exacting mastery of a realm of knowledge, e-knowledge. It's not for everyday thinking about what's for dinner or what should I grocery shop for, whom to vote in the next election, things of that sort. It's not in the realm of Sophia, because Sophia, but it's phronesis has to do with the particulars, with what's going on a day-to-day basis. That's the real difference between the two. And of course, part of the contrast it is not just between Sophia and phronesis, but there are other minor abilities that Aristotle talks about. So here I'm just bringing 4 of them. One is well deliberating. Another one is objectivity. The third one is right judgment. The fourth one is equity. So he talks about that too. But now it gets me to the fun part on how to distinguish and see that wisdom as cognitive, because all along I have hinted that we are talking about intellectual virtue. We're talking about wisdom as something that is cognitive, uh, because we just compared that with the Sophia, and that has to do with an awareness of gravity, of the stars, of the orbits of the of satellites and planets. But what about the awareness that comes from wisdom? What is that? And and that's what the whole point of the meeting, which is that what is wisdom supposed to be like uh, uh, if we are wise? And what are we supposed to be seeing? And is that not the whole point of what is the what we should do so that we can secure all the human goods that are available, goods of the soul, goods of the body, goods of the cosmos, uh, and to be able to act to gain them, and then to enjoy that life, in a complete life. So so and all of that hinges on the awareness of that wisdom brings. So what is that? So part of the Nicomachean Ethics, chapter 5, chapter 8, gives us the most detailed information about what wisdom is. So a way to know what being wise is to observe those we call wise. So Aristotle is very commonsensical in the way that, hey, if you want to know what being wise is, and you, the students, the 17, 18, 19-year-old, why don't you observe other people who are wise? Start there. And so what is that? And he says, the wise is capable of deliberating beautifully about what is good and beneficial for himself, not just in part, but as a whole. And this whole comprised in terms of time, not just for now, but for the long term. In departments, not just about healthcare or strength training, but about total external bodily soulful well-being. We get an inkling of what being wise is from noticing how the word wise is ascribed to people in certain roles, jobs, or professions, whenever they calculate well towards some serious goal in that role, and their success is not based on their having solely or at all the particular know-how. In other words, there are certain situations where, okay, you're a pilot and you're piloting an airplane. So you've been trained, you have the know-how to fly the airplane. But then in this particular situation where there has never been any training involved, and somehow if you're not able to make the right decision, make the right call to do the right thing, the whole plane will crash. But somehow you are able to do that. That is the point that Aristotle is making here. We get an inkling for what is being wise when people know how to make these decisions outside of a particular techne, outside of a particular know-how. And yet they're able to do that time and time again, consistently, over and over. So alternative to calling it being lucky is to see that there are people who flourish, and they do it because they're able to know what to do. They seem more prepared, seeming to have forethought about or anticipated what might or should happen. And these inklings corroborate toward our view of being wise. As being good at deliberating on the whole. And so being wise or being good at deliberating presupposes a world in which we can change, and that we ourselves are the source of change in the world, meaning the whole point of free will and so on. And then, of course, we don't deliberate about episteme, because gravity is not something we deliberate about, because we only discover that, not deliberate about it. And secondly, about things whose source of change isn't in us. In other words, if we're talking about things about what somebody else would do, well, then let them think about what they would do, not you. You worry about yourself, and so on. It's like the busybodies. I think he was attacking the busybody who was just trying to think for other people. Let them think for themselves. They're human beings too. That's the whole point. And so being wise then is an active condition. And there's a key word that we talked about, the hexes. That is truth disclosing, accompanied by reason, bound up or concerned with any action about things good and bad for a human being. So you can see that this being wise is not something that just happened once in a while. It's happening all the time. Because are you not eating? Are you not washing dishes? Are you not peeling potatoes? Are you not driving a car? In any one of those moments, if the person is wise, then there's a capacity in him that is on, that is active, that tells, this is true, and the reason or some kind of thinking is involved, and that it's connected to the current activity, the action that's happening right now. And that if you are wise, you know that what you're doing is good for you as a human being. Why thus do we deem Pericles? So that's one of the heroes, the general that Aristotle invoked to the young crowd at the time during the lecture. Why do we deem Pericles and such people to be wise? Because they can see, observe, have a clear view, contemplate. So the Greek word is theorin, but I think the best word for it is just to see, or one of these. So because they see what is good for themselves and what is good in the measure of a human being in general. So as you can see, we are talking about cognition. Phronesis, wisdom, is an ability to see. It is an ability to see what is good for you. And those of us good, now this is Aristotle continuing, those of us good at managing households or economics and political affairs have this capacity. So, so think about what I said at the beginning when I said that Aristotle was addressing the young people who are fresh out of high school or fresh out of prison from a long incarceration, or are immigrants coming into a country with but a few $100s in their pockets. If they're good at wherever, if they're good at managing the household or managing their income, they would have some sort of capacity to what phronesis, to what wisdom is. Or if they are running for office, supposedly, let's say Aristotle is very particular about this, but supposing that they are trying to manage the city-state, the Athens or one of the Greek islands or Greek states, then they must be good at how to see what is good for the human being. So he's saying that if you want to know what wisdom is, look for these people and observe, see what it is that they're able to anticipate and see. But the whole point is that they're able to see. They're able to see something. And so each of our character trait, and now here's the if part of this. Yeah, they can see, but how is it they're able to see? Each of our character trait. Now, I talked about the character traits earlier, the moral character traits about punctuality, bravery, being lavish, being proud, being ambitious, uh, and moderate and generous, and being fair. All of those character traits, each of them, each of our character traits either preserves or corrupts the active condition contributing toward our potentially becoming wise. Acting from an outside the middle state trait stunts, undermines, or even destroys the budding intellectual virtue in the making. Positively and reciprocally, then, acting from virtue enables gradually our forming a clear view of what is good for ourselves as human beings. And reciprocally, it's the other way around, of course. So example is being moderate, for example, sustains and nurtures our capacity to know what is good for us as human beings. By contrast, being lecherous and gluttonous, it distorts or ruins this intellectual potential in us to see the beautiful, the ugly, the good, and the pleasant. So by supply, what that means is that how is it that we're not able to be wise? And Aristotle has both a positive view of human beings, our potentiality, but he is very realistic. He says most people are just bad people. He's saying this right here. Acting from an outside the middle state trait stunts, undermines, or even destroys the budding intellectual virtue in the making. How? By supplying abundant, pleasant, or painful occasions for our encountering and observing starting points that are either false or in disagreement with correct desires. And so if you fall for the temptations of all the pleasant stuff, you're not going to be able to see that there are certain things that are painful but are good for you, such as studying or learning a new trade, learning a new craft. It's boring, maybe. It's difficult, time consuming, not very fun. But if you just follow the pleasant, it's not going to give you what is the correct for your life in the long run. But that's the whole point here. Acting from outside of this character trait of the middle state will undermine everything else. And it will distort the internal feedback, cognitive mechanism to generate evaluative convictions. And the key word about this conviction is hupolepsis. In other words, as you do your everyday things, you are putting in, you're adding or strengthening or weakening your dispositions for other things, including your ideas and your beliefs about what's good for you or what's bad for you, and that's the convictions that can happen. And such distortions, notes Aristotle, don't affect descriptive judgment, only prescriptive ones, presumably because the former have no part in human choice. And thereby, it corrupts and misguides our awareness of the starting points and the evaluative judgments nearer to us, which constitute the inductive data for grasping that ultimate end for the sake of which any of our action is undertaking. This last point, let me elaborate a little bit. It means that what are we seeing? What does Aristotle say that the wise person is seeing when he's acting, like driving a car or eat a meal or talking to a spouse? Any one of those activity, there's accompanies an awareness. An awareness of what? Awareness that only wisdom can provide. And what that awareness is this ultimate end, for the sake of which any of our action is undertaken. My example, when I think about this, is taking out the trash. Now, we take out the trash. It's just 10 steps from the kitchen, let's say, to the dump, to the trash bin outside. Maybe 10 steps, maybe 20 steps. Who knows? But what does it serve? And you can see that taking out the trash can serve just maybe superficially, if you're not able to see more than that as a child, because as a child you were told to do some errands in the house, take out the trash, that's your job, okay? But then gradually, now let's say as an adult, you realize, hey, taking out the trash could mean many things because of you becoming wise, let's say. At first, it's keeping the house clean. But at the same time, you realize if you're living with someone else or with a spouse, taking out the trash serves to strengthen a romantic relationship. That's a kind of connection I'm just bringing out right now to see to demonstrate that Aristotle's point about any human action must be connected not superficially to one step or two steps, but to an ultimate end, for the sake of which any of our action, like taking out the trash, is undertaken. And so the point Aristotle is making here is that the wise person is someone who is able to see his whole life as one unity, such that picking out just one thread of it, one activity like taking out the trash, can be seen in the larger whole for that person. And so that's what a wise person can do. Unlike the child or the youth who can just complain, oh, why should I take out the trash, or just feel that it's such a mundane, such a pain to do. But if someone who is wise, he's going to be able to say, hey, taking out the trash is part of nurturing a romantic relationship. Why not, right? I'm just making that up. So being wise is an active condition. And now I'm just repeating a little bit uh, uh, about our standard of what is good and bad for a human being. That is truth disclosing, accompanied by reason, bound up with any action. All this is repeated earlier, but one more thing. And reflectively true during every deliberating and acting. That is the key for being wise. It comes with having all the moral virtues that are there, because the two are reciprocally related, and that one can't exist without the other. So what turns out true is the constant background thinking. And this is the key word again, the hupolepsis, the constant conviction that you have in the background, articulating your awareness, not of what is, but what ought to be a flourishing life for yourself, for ourselves. Let's see if I can skip this. No, I can't skip this. I'm trying to skip as much as I can. So being wise, although a virtue of thought, is rather like a virtue of character, and unlike an art or technical skill, fine. And it requires you to be able to deliberate well, choose the right means, and doing the right thing in every situation. So there's the point where you saw earlier in the big picture of what ethics is about, living a good life. All the bodily, soulful, and external goods are without nothing missing, but you have to do a lot of action. And in order to act, you have to deliberate, and you have to choose the right means, do the right thing in every situation, and factoring in all the details. And that's what this is about as phronesis. I'm trying to skip a lot. So let me see if I can skip another one. Okay, I can't skip this one. Okay, let's skip it. Okay, let's skip it. Um, okay, so I already alluded the elements of deliberation, being given a goal, the grouping, and the particulars. Let's skip this one again. But the whole point is that you need to be able to see what is going on. So perceiving, you need to be able to have intellect, and you need to be able to account for all your desires. Um, and if you don't have a if your desires are unrequited, then you're not living a good life. So you have to include all of your desires. And of course, we have to acknowledge that some desires are bad and some desires are good. You have to figure out, you have to deliberate about that too, about which of the desires are the correct desires and which are the wrong, incorrect desires. But nevertheless, you have to account for all your desires in your deliberating. And so that's a whole point about being wise, is you have to juggle everything about you, who you are, about your character, about your action, about your society, where you are living, what technology is available, what funds and what means are available to you to act, all of that, and be able to know what is good for you right now, right this moment, and whether you should take out the trash, all of that. Okay, so now that we see wisdom as cognitive, um, let's look at the object of that cognition, and see what being wise is really about, and how to get there. Uh, and so being wise then is the capacity, as I said, it's a hexis, to see. And I'm just using all the words that I'm trying to convey to let people know that wisdom is cognitive. All right? Wisdom is this capacity to see. But remember what I said earlier also, between the difference between energeia, activity, versus dunamis, or potentiality. Being wise in the way that I'm describing here is merely a capacity. You have to do the action on the spot. But at least let's talk about the capacity. So being wise is the capacity to see the singular object of the trifecta, the good, the beautiful, and the pleasant, eudaimonia, or the good life, as your goal unit, so as to choose optimally for your on the ground activity in the moment, a sub now, the activity, over a complete life, the summation of a, all the A's, all the activities. So there's the complete life, but here's the activity now that you have to deliberate. You have to choose the right activity for the now. But you have to consider the now in the context of the complete life for yourself. But how? Not just for yourself, but through your household and through your city state, because you're not living alone. You're living in a larger society as well. So that's the definition, that my definition of what being wise is. So being wise is not the same as being skilled at a skill. And being wise concerns the doable in action as the concrete. It is the ultimate self-grown capacity for flourishing 24/7 as a human being. And what does that mean? Flourishing 24/7 as a human being entails you're doing well in all the parts of a whole. That is, in all your roles in specific relationships as a human being. So as a human being, what are some of the things that you have to do? Well, you have to do in the world. You have to eat, you have to sleep. So these are the physical and the psychological activities that you have to do. But then what are the other roles in the society, in social living, as a spouse or as a parent, in a family group, in a home? So you have to consider your romantic relationship, your parental relationship, and that's a 24/7 kind of job as well, right? And then as a worker, employer, employee kind of relationship that you have in a business group, Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. So it's only a sliver of your life, right? We're talking about the whole life, right? In all parts of your whole, but then this is just the business part from Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. So you have to have your productive relationship, commercial relationship. Don't you go to a grocery shop? That's more commercial relationship, but your relationship between a clerk, a sales clerk, and you as a customer, all these relationships you have to account for. And then, of course, you have you're a citizen or a public servant in a city. You can be both, maybe, if you work for the city. Then you are both a citizen and a public servant. And then you have to have electoral kind of relationship, whom to vote for, whom to not vote for, civil society, civil servant kind of relationship. You have upper and lower management, the bureaucracy. You have to be able to make decisions and live in those kinds of relationships. And then as a juror, also in a jury, you have judicial relationship. So this is one human being. One single human being does all of these things. And so I'm just illustrating the scope of where wisdom has to take account for to guide your everyday activities. And so the structure in the way that Aristotle talks about is on the ground, in the moment, the activity now. You have your human self choosing what bodily aspect for your bodily goods, the mental aspect for your soulful goods, the household management is for your external goods, like family department, business department, your citywide kind of thing, your deliberative judicial for the common good, which is also a species of the external goods. So all of these are the on-the-ground activities that comprise everything underneath here. And so that's every moment, temporal part. But then it has to fit in with the temporal whole, the summation of all the activities in this architectonic sense, that whatever you do right now, whatever you eat right now, does it contribute to the whole being of who you are, or does it somehow give you only a flash moment of pleasure, but then it runs you for the next month or year, like maybe a huge hangover if you drink too much or something like that. So the architectonic choosing is for the good of the individual, for the person, and for the legislative, and so on. And so these are the techniques. So that's the difference between phronesis and techne, such as ethics, economics, politics. It's not any of that. Phronesis is for you, your life, and you have to be good at making decisions and deliberating for your life, not only for the on the ground choosing, but also for the total of your life. So that's the relationship that Aristotle is trying to highlight. So let's see if I can. Let's skip this. It's more than I thought. I put more than I needed to. I thought I rehearsed it, but let's skip this to. Okay, let's skip the rest. Okay, all right. So you pretty much see the big picture. And it has to do with perception, because you have to be alive. You have to be, but this perception is encrusted or is halo with wisdom. That's the whole point. So the whole point is we are saying that phronesis is translated as wisdom, is a kind of awareness. But isn't perception already awareness? Yes, perception is a form of awareness, except perception is what any animal can do, right? Wisdom is the human way of being aware through language and so on, but it allows you to see the, what is what is perceivable, what is perceptible, and see it connected to your life. And so that's the term that Aristotle is talking about is what he calls halo perceiving or enlightened perception. Wisdom is more of this enlightened perception, different from the raw animal kind. And so the whole point is that as you do the things that you do, you started to lay put down in your soul certain disposition, certain policy. Oh, this is good for me, this is bad for me. And over time, this layer of this is good for me, this is bad for me, it will start to enlighten anything that you perceive, anything that you look at. It's no longer just a triangle in the example that Aristotle has here. It's not no longer just taking out the trash. It's no longer just a doorknob or something, but more it allows you to see something larger, how it fits with the rest of your life. And so that means that the example that people look at is compare your perception with the perception of a dog, because a dog doesn't have language in the way that we are talking about here. And then let's say what the dog and you are perceiving is some human beings moving around in the room. Well, for the dog, that's all it probably will perceive, that human beings are walking around or moving around in the room. But for the human being, they say, hey, the people, the couples, they are dancing. So dancing is an overlay on top of the perception, the enlightened perception. And if you are the better expert, let's say, you can say, the couple is dancing the tango and not the cha-cha or something like that. And then if you're even better with a certain skill in that, you say, they're not only performing the tango, but they are doing the corte or something like that. One of those steps that people are doing for that particular tango. So it is enlightened. The perception has been enlightened by layers, another layer of awareness. And that layer of awareness that we're talking about here is wisdom. Okay, let's see if we can skip the rest, because pretty much that's the whole point that Aristotle is trying to bring out. I think it's 11.2 here that let's see. Yeah. Nope. Let's skip this one too. Okay, I think I cover the full structure of the what awareness comes into the picture as wisdom is for Aristotle. So let me put this one lingering question that people ask about Phronesis. What is wisdom as a power? Why be wise? What's the gain for that? And I say you gain the always activated power to bring forth from the depth of your exquisitely curated soul an awareness of your life's true desires that are achievable through your doing, an awareness of what is best and beautiful for the whole of you as a human being, given the place, time, and civilization in which you live. And that's my presentation.
Wonderful. Wow. That's a lot to
Was that too much?
know, but it's a lot to think about, right? We'll open it up to questions and see where we go from there. Okay. Alvin, unmute yourself, please.
Yeah, I did. Thank you. Yeah, it was very interesting and very informative. But it seemed, at least in parts of it, I mean, there's some parts where you do make the connection to moral judgment and where you broaden it out somewhat to wisdom for you or yourself, your family, and your city, and so on. But in the more bare definitions of wisdom, it seems that wisdom can be quite different for yourself, wisdom for your family, and wisdom for your city, and wisdom for humanity can all be quite different from each other. And without moral connection, then you could have wisdom being perceived by a lot of people as quite evil, because wisdom gives you the ability to do what's best for you and best for your family, perhaps, and may not be best for a lot of other people. So is that what's intended, or is wisdom intended to be more encompassing so that it obviates the possibilities of doing things which are going to be worse or bad for other human beings?
Well, thank you for the question. I would say that wisdom is seeing your life. It's your life focus. It's not other people's life focus. It's not altruistic in the way that you are talking about. Now we can talk about ethics from a meta-ethical level and say that is Aristotle's ethics altruistic? Aristotle would say no, it is not. It is not Christian, because the Christian ethics is pretty much altruistic. And Aristotle is saying no. Well, he didn't know what Christianity is, but it predates it. But my point is that the ethics that Aristotle is providing here is about, it's a prerequisite for his politics, for how to govern and manage a city. And a city has to survive. A city has to survive from invasion and from other calamities out there. But the prerequisite of politics is ethics. And the ethics starts out with know your life. Don't worry about other people. Let other people decide their lives. And it's very similar to when you go in an airplane and the flight attendants say, when there's an emergency, put the mask on you first before you do it on someone else. So that's the whole point of that.
Lisa, unmute yourself.
Okay, I'm using my phone. So it's a question regarding Sophia, because when you brought up Sophia and I found the book, because I'd never seen Sophia. Well, it's Sophia is the word used in the Jewish traditions and early wisdom Christology. And so on Sophia, it says that in the wisdom tradition, Sophia is personified in the female form, and that wisdom in Hebrew is Chokmah, and in Greek it's Sophia, which is a feminine noun of wisdom. And then I'm reading from a book from Marcus Borg, And what he says is, he says that, so Sophia, if I'm understanding Borg correctly, is is like Eros, which is a god. And in the Jewish tradition, using she's a feminine aspect, she has a prophetic quality about her. So she's a wisdom figure that's prophetic. And I was wondering if that is just a artifact of taking something that is Jewish and translating it into Greek, or if Sophia actually would have that metaphysical quality in Aristotle or Aristotle's time.
Well, thank you for that question. My response is that I don't know enough of the other traditions, but all I can say is that Aristotle was responding to the teachings of Plato and those prior in the philosophical tradition that he was taught, and he wanted to distinguish phronesis from Sophia, and at the same time he wanted to defend only one aspect of Sophia, not all the other varieties that could be there. And the first examples he said were most people at the time thought of Sophia or someone who is Sophos is someone who has exquisite ability for a particular art or craft, like a sculptor, or so they're great at that. But Aristotle is rejecting that view totally. He's saying it has to be about knowledge of the world that is that's there, and so we are talking about what is the highest and most exalted thing that someone who's Sophos for Aristotle should be having. It is an awareness of the highest form or the most exalted things in the universe, and so that's someone who is wise in this Sophia way. But again, Aristotle, having talked about it, say that's not what I'm talking about either. I'm talking about being wise in terms of living a good life.
Mm-hmm.
And that is that's his focus throughout the whole. Even though when he talked about Sophia in the two versions I mentioned, the focus has always been it's your life that you need to work on. So I'm not familiar with the other views that you bring up about what Sophia is, but nevertheless, I think it's beyond what Aristotle was talking about.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Don, please unmute.
Okay. I didn't hear any explicit discussion of the role of chance or the fact that all of our decisions are really gambles. We may be going to an appointment and usually the freeway is the fastest way to go, but this particular day it's there's an accident and we arrive late, or we sacrifice and we save to have a comfortable retirement, and then we die shortly after retiring. Everything we do is a gamble, and there wasn't much of any explicit discussion of that.
Well, thank you for bringing that up, because Aristotle, when he splits the realms of knowable into the area that cannot be otherwise, and the area that can be otherwise and up to us, he acknowledges your point about chance, about things that are we don't know enough. And he acknowledges that knowledge, having awareness, is the basis for making any of those things. Had you known that, had you looked in advance on the internet or on listening on the radio about the traffic jam here and there, you might have made a different decision to go on a different road. So it's about knowledge as a value, as a good. And in the area you're talking about concerning chance, Aristotle would be talking about a good of the soul, which is knowledge itself. Knowledge is the good that you would want to have as much as possible, but not too much that will impede you from doing all the other things in life. But that's how you control the things that are chance, or things that are you just don't know enough to skip this or that decision making process. But part of deliberating, a good well deliberating at any moment, is you have all the available information up that you have for you to make that choice. And so the good soul that I mentioned, which is knowledge, is part of that calculation that you would have to have. So I did not bring in a lot of chance, because people, all the successful people that Aristotle mentioned, the wise people, somehow are able to overcome a lot of let's say unknowns, so that they can make the right decision, and that they live to report on their success, I guess. But the whole point is that it is knowledge that is what can overcome some of these random events that you're talking about.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, yes, thank you, Tom. And I came here on a chance. I really have a lot of other things to do, but I was very interested to see what Aristotle might have to say about knowing, which is a very big issue in mindfulness type of perception of the world and behavior in the world. Because knowing is not merely intellectual or cognitive, but also it opens up to other aspects of the psyche, lower areas of the nervous system, if you will, and so on. Well, I got a surprise. It didn't really have any of that, but it did have something that really was significant to me. Yeah, first, as a quick comment, is the relationship between things that came up in this question period is like a relationship between earlier stages of Buddhism, where what you might say wisdom, if you will, or the way, or enlightenment, had to do with attaining one's own personal liberation from all the difficulties and obtaining nirvana, basically, and so on, getting even beyond a sense of personal self, which is perhaps opening up things very wide, where you're no longer idiocentric. You become more, I suppose, you become more allocentric. But there's something that I noticed when I was doing a mantram practice, which was in the Hinayana tradition, which is more allocentric and focused on others, which is the issue that came up, and it was a question was raised here, and I think a concern that was raised here with the limitations of Aristotle's approach. It focused on the individual in a certain way, right? It wasn't really about us. It wasn't we thinking. But it's very interesting, because how he talks about gaining a perspective in the sense of taking into account all these other things in the body of knowledge which one has in order to achieve an Aristotelian goal, the one that you described. It was that it was really, I found that in a mantram practice, which was before my mindfulness practice, that's what it did, is by practicing a mantram, that has an effect. It's neuroscience stuff, but an observable effect on the mind, where one sees solutions to problems. So this is really an opening up of beyond regular cognition, but it's still cognition. Knowing, knowing is knowing, right? Where one could see solutions to problems, and it was all about people and their relations, and perhaps seeing or experiencing, in a better way to put it, their perspective as well, and bringing all that into it to get to a solution to things. What would be what you would call a wise solution to things? They don't really talk about it in terms of wisdom, but that's what it comes out to. And that is so that was what really striking me, is how much of what his perspective is on how you get there really comes out of, is also something that isn't something that happens in these practices, although it's somewhat of a different kind of knowing than perhaps he was thinking of.
Well, thank you for the comment. I will have to just make your comment on your comment by saying that Aristotle's view of knowledge is very particular to his view, to his theory of knowledge, and to in a certain way, to a certain level, a certain kind of metaphysics. And so his view of knowledge, as I said at the beginning, rejected the Platonic theory. And so he, if we are to understand Aristotle's ethics, we really have to understand his view of what knowledge is. And this knowledge, this view of knowledge, begins with perception. It acknowledges the animal nature of the human being, and it accounts for the for objects or perceptibles as something that we can only gain from perceiving them. And then it is only through years and years and years of work on the soul, to curate the soul, I call it, to be able to see the right thing for the perceptible, so that the same thing to an evil person, the same perceptible may be for him good, but for a wise person, the same perceptible can be bad. So we have to understand how it is that the human being can curate whatever it is in the soul, so that it skews how he will perceive the thing. So that's the only thing that I can say for in comment to you, that this form of cognition that Aristotle is talking about has a human element, the intellectual element that requires our own doing. It is not something that someone else can do for us. It is not something that depends on other people either, because yes, we depend on other for the language that we use, but after that, it's we from the inside who has to do all of the mental work, all the inferences and organization from within to make to organize our knowledge. So and so as to give us the kind of convictions that we have. So that's my comment to you.
Okay.
Dorothy, last question.
Well, I'll be brief. Just one thing surprised me a little bit, and I'm trying to think from within the Aristotelian perspective of developing wisdom to understand what's best for oneself. But from that point of view, I don't understand why he excludes Sophos, because as he describes Sophos, as I understand it, it's an understanding of those things that we can't control. But nonetheless, our welfare does depend upon the things that we can't control also. We have to understand, how the difference between day and night. We have to understand physics. Certainly understanding biology has helped us understand medicine, which has helped us, and so on. So why, I'm just curious, for some reason, I just have here for the recording, confirm your speaking language, and it says Arabic. Just a minute. Anyway, I thought I was speaking English. Okay, go on.
Well, thank you for that question. What I said was that Aristotle wanted to distinguish phronesis, wisdom, from Sophia. He did not want, I did not say that he doesn't want us to be wise in the Sophia sense. He wants us to have both. But the point of my presentation is to tell the young person or the person who is just fresh out of college or high school what to expect from to be wise, to live a good life. And along the way, Aristotle says, hey, by the way, you need to also gain Sophia as well. And that everything you said must be included as part of the good life. The good life is not just to just know what to do and then never read anymore about the stars, the galaxy, and applied science, because technology is based on theoretical science. So you have to have theoretical science in order to have applied science, and that's techne. So all of that is round up in the area I call good of the soul, and that knowledge is good of the soul that he wants everyone to have with nothing missing as well. Although my emphasis was to distinguish the two, I don't think Aristotle ever said we should just choose one or the other. He wants both.
Okay. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Tom. Again, wonderful presentation.